Morena everybody, and welcome to our first fully remote council meeting as a result of COVID-19 epidemic notice of 2020. Our meeting is being live streamed, and it will be, and it can be open to the public at this time, and the council website will have a direct link on the home page to the agenda and the live streaming. And the homepage will be updated after the meeting with the minutes and the meeting summary. So for all of those in our community at home who are watching, I want every councillor to introduce themselves to you all, please, starting with Deputy Mayor Dave Donaldson.
Morena, Dave Donaldson, Deputy Mayor. Kia ora.
Councillor Kai Fong.
Morena, Central Kaipong.
Morena. And Councillor
Steve, you're on mute, please.
So Councillor Kumar is missing, but he will come in and we'll just let him join the meeting. And if members are late, we don't go back on what we've been discussing. Councillor McPherson.
Morena.
Councillor Maxwell. Councillor Maxwell.
Morena, ke te pēhia koutou.
Tino pai.
Councillor Tapsell.
Morena koutou.
Kia ora. Councillor Rokawa Tate.
Tēnā koutou.
Great. Councillor Wang.
Morena.
Morena. And Councillor Yates.
Morena tātou.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. Oh, I thought we'd said it. Sorry, Councillor Bentley. Good morning. Good morning. It's just so people know, and then all our participants are noted on the screen. So this meeting's been called today to discuss COVID-19 and the delegations to the Chief Executive, the COVID-19 Economic Recovery Plan, and 3 confidential items of contracts for the extension of local road and network management contract, the contract for the recommendation to award the road and network maintenance and management contract, and the Rotorua Lakes Council COVID-19 rates relief packages, and they will be taken in confidential. If I just remind members, because this is quite new to us, it's challenging in the times of COVID-19, and we need to do our business quite differently now and make decisions in a different way. Our standing orders are still in place, and in addition, some extra meeting protocols have been shared that will be used to ensure good meeting practice. Please keep to strict time frames and speaking times, and I'm noting those here as each of you speak. Now, when you go to speak or ask a question or discuss an item, you must go to your participants screen, which is at the bottom bar, and click on participants, and there's a little icon there that says raise your hand, and click on lower hand when the request or your vote has been taken. Thank you, everybody, and I beg for our indulgence because there will inevitably be a few glitches until we get this streamlined to all of our satisfaction. So I'm going to ask Councillor Maxwell now if you could open our meeting with the karakia. Councillor Maxwell.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, he karakia mō tātou. E te atua kaharawa, ko koe te tohu rangatira, te tohu mātauranga. Mena ki tia mai mātou o ponanga I tēnei wā. E mahi nei, I a mātou mahi, mō te painga o ngā tāngata o te kaunihera o Rotorua. Tuku a mai ki a tau te rangi Māori ki runga i a mātou I ngā wā katoa. Ko ihu karaiti hoki tō mātou ariki. Āmene. Almighty God, who alone is the leader of all mankind and the fountain of all knowledge, send thy blessing upon us, your servants, this day, as we strive to do all things good for the betterment of the people of the Rotorua district. May we be tolerant in ourselves at all times, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Kia ora.
Amen. We now go to the first item on our agenda, and that's a call for any apologies. We have no apologies, and perhaps we just note when members come into the meeting, if we can note that through our controller, Kim. Thank you. So we don't have to move a motion there. Are there any declarations of interest? There appear to be none. Thank you. We'll now move to staff reports, and the first recommendation, decision-making COVID-19 delegations to the Chief Executive. Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report, that the report decision-making during COVID-19 delegations to the Chief Executive be received? A mover, please.
I move, Madam Chair.
Seconded.
I do, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Yates. All those in favour, please say aye to receive the report.
Aye.
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 Now, JP, you are going to give an overview of this report.
I'll step in there and do this one, Madam Chair. So the first item on the agenda today is decision making during COVID-19, delegations to the Chief Executive. Councillors, you will recall that this paper was brought to you last week at our extraordinary council meeting that we had then. At that time, there hadn't been any changes to the legislation made in terms of being able to undertake normal decision making during this time. Since then, the legislation has been changed and gives us the ability to hold remote meetings and to be classed as being present. As you will recall, that paper stated that when the first council meeting is then convened following the endorsement of that recommendation, that those delegations to the Chief Executive would be revoked. Following discussions with the Mayor and Deputy Mayor and the executive team, and the challenges that everybody has been dealing with over the last week, and looking at the forward planning that needs to happen, we are suggesting and recommending that those delegations to the Chief Executive continue during the time that the epidemic notice or the Alert 4 is in place. This is purely for a backstop and a safety security measure, because as you can see, we are bringing to you and providing a decision-making process. But we're just wanting to put this in place should matters escalate or anything changes during the next couple of weeks. So I'm happy to take any questions.
A question from Councillor McPherson, followed by Councillor Donaldson and Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I raised my hand during the introductory section. Normally where we have any matters to be considered under urgency, I had an issue to be raised there. It can wait until we've finished this discussion about delegations.
Thank you. Sorry, and we couldn't, I couldn't see your hand then, sorry.
No problem, no problem.
Right, Councillor Tapsell.
Good morning, everyone. The question that I had around the delegations was just a technical one to ensure that if we continue the delegations to the Chief Executive, that won't hinder Council in meeting or making any decisions. As an example, we still have items on the agenda, so just confirming that the Council can still meet and make decisions, but in an instance that we won't be able to, the Chief Executive is still able to make decisions. So just a technical question. Thank you.
Una, would you like to clarify that?
Yes, thank you. Councillor Tapsell, yes, you are quite right. What we're doing here is just providing additional security, I suppose, around our decision-making process. And that if for any reason the council cannot be convened together and cannot get a quorum, then those chief executive delegations are in place and would allow operations or events under emergency to continue.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So mine was more a point of order, and I'm not sure if we've all got with the technology yet, but when you call for a mover and a seconder, there's a raise hand function and a lower hand function on the participants panel. And we need to use that to put our hand up to speak and also to record votes. So I just want to make sure everyone's okay with that. Also in the top right, there is a gallery view. So we can see if everyone's not on gallery view, then they're not seeing all of the participants at the same time. So if we're on gallery view and using the raise hand, lower hand, we'll all be on the same page on who's putting their hand up to move, second, vote, whichever way they want to vote. That's all I wanted to raise at this stage.
Thank you. Thank you. So there appears to be no more questions for clarification. Could I, so go to the participants list. Could I have a mover and a seconder for the motion 234? Yeah, 234. So please raise your hand.
So I believe there that Mercia's hand went
Yes.
up first as the mover.
Mover, seconder.
Didn't catch the seconder. I now have multiple hands up.
So I'll second. And now if you could please go to your participants list and tick off, raise your hand. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Keep pressing the icon if you can find it. They're coming in. There's still some more to come in. If you go to the participants list at the very bottom of your page, your screen, and press, thank you, raise your hand.
The motion is carried.
The motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And could I assure everybody that during this first week of Scale 4, there have been no incidences at all where the delegations needed to be invoked or actioned. Right, we move now to recommendation 2, COVID-19.
Sorry, Steve, can I just cut in there? Can I please ask for the Mayor, Tanya and Trevor to lower hands at this stage, please?
Yes, it's very hard doing all this at the same time. Short. Okay. No, there's still some that need to lower their hand.
Sorry, is this a good time to pick up the issue of the urgency item?
I'll allow it, Councillor McPherson, because, and then we'll move into the COVID-19 economic recovery plan.
Good, thank you very much. A small matter, small question, that is, will the video record of this meeting be edited? Thank you.
Una, could you cover that, please?
Oh. So the video will not be edited, and I just want to clarify the reason there were a couple of elements taken out of the last council meeting was that a number of issues were raised which were recorded, which were actually confidential items, and you all discussed those in what was considered a public arena. They were removed for security reasons and to allow the full announcements to be made. So those were the reasons for that there. So long as we keep to our standing orders and discuss public items in a public forum and leave confidential matters to the confidential section, then there will be no need to do any editing of this public part of the meeting.
Thank you, Una.
Thank you.
We move now to item 3.2, the recommendation COVID-19 Rotorua Economic Recovery Plan, Build Back Better. I need a mover and a seconder that the report COVID-19 Rotorua Economic Recovery Plan, Build Back Better, be received.
I have a mover from Councillor Donaldson and a seconder from Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
So do you want to raise your hands again? Yep. Please go to your participants bar and raise your hand. It's passed.
Yes, the motion is carried.
And so now lower your hands. Right. So to overview the report, JP, I understand you're going to do this.
That's correct, Your Worship. Morena, everyone. Councillors, I hope you can hear me okay. Is coming through okay? I'm looking to the Mayor to see if she can give me a thumbs up that audio is coming through okay. Councillors, I've just got a PowerPoint presentation that I'll share on the screen now. Unfortunately, while I'm sharing it, I can't see anyone. So if it's possible, Your Worship, that we maybe save the questions to the finish of the presentation. And I'll be joined probably at the end of the presentation by the Chief Financial Officer, Thomas Collet, to answer off any questions at that point. So I'll just put the screen up. If I have any technical issues, I've had a discussion with Una about her putting the presentation up, and then I potentially will dial back in on my phone as opposed to my laptop. So I'm just going to share my screen now, councillors. Oops, I'm just, bear with me for a second, councillors. Apologies, councillors. I've just got a wee bit of a technical issue at my end here. I'm just going to drop out for a second, and I have dropped out. Am I still there? Yeah. So I'm just closing a couple of windows. I'm sorry. I've just got too many things open at the moment, which is preventing me from sharing one of my documents. So sorry, councillors, I'll just try again to share this. Again, I'm apologising, councillors. I can't seem to see my presentation there.
JP, I can take over and I'll pull it up on the screen.
Thank you,
Una. Don't know quite what was happening there. So, councillors, what I've got for you at the moment is just the presentation of what we've called the Rotorua Economic Recovery Plan, Build Back Better. Now, the reason why we've used the term Build Back Better is not the intention that it's a cute little term to refer to it. Is actually been part of a United Nations review and resolution about how you recover from significant natural disasters, and it's now become part of the recovery planning of New Zealand Civil Defence. So Build Back Better is a view that you're not just trying to recover where you were through a natural disaster, but you're actually trying to become more resilient and as it says, build back better. So councillors, you'll remember from the extraordinary meeting we had last week, we agreed that we would mirror the government strategy. So following through for a council strategy of currently supporting the fighting of the virus, cushion the economic and social impacts on our community, and obviously position our district for recovery. Now, the key elements of this plan, councillors, is that it covers a starting point which is in an immediate response phase, so that cushion that economic and social impact. But really, at some point, we're also starting to create a planning approach for us to think about the medium and long term. Now, obviously, that's quite difficult at this stage when we're in lockdown level 4 and we don't have a picture of when New Zealand will be returning to normal and our economy and I suppose our social interactions will be returning to normal. So we have to keep a dynamic planning approach as we go forward. So councillors, what we've sort of identified here is I think 6 key strategies that we will be focusing on in shaping our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So councillors, what we're looking to do with you today is just to get your agreement around the key strategies which will underpin our economic recovery plan. So you can see the objectives or those strategies down the bullet points there, and I'll just briefly talk to them and you'll see more detail as I go through the presentation. So intent to build on Rotorua's unique strengths. Obviously, we've spent a lot of time shaping Vision 2030 through 2 and now 3 council terms. But at the last one in 2016, 2017, we picked up on that focus of saying, look, we need to build on our strengths and shaping and making this place unique and special. And that's obviously really important for our community, but also it helps us to be attractive to other people who might want to move here, invest here, and it also supports those who might want to visit our city and our district as well. So the next bullet point there is quite important too: create a confident business environment that encourages investment in the emergence of new sectors. I think one of the fundamentals of building back better is to look at the opportunities for us to respond to the changing world that will no doubt be in place post COVID-19, but also to look at how we can take this as an opportunity to diversify our business sectors and ensure that the focus is broader for some of those. Having said that, the next bullet point there as a strategy is to work with those business leaders to create innovative strategies for those impacted sectors. Clearly, some sectors have been affected more than others, and even within those sectors, the impacts have varied between minor to devastating. The next one there, councillors, is to position Rotorua as leading the resurgence of tourism and wood processing. So 2 of our most significant employers are significant contributors to our GDP, and I suppose 2 sectors which have underpinned the Rotorua economy for a very long time. So really important that we see them coming back because there is such a significant investment from our community and its workforce, but also in the attractions and businesses that operate here. The second to last bullet point, clearly we have the opportunity to leverage central and local government investment to drive employment and obviously to support that resurgence across the city. So government is very keen to look at some of the immediate stimulus packages, but equally as a local government authority or territorial authority, we have the opportunity to really look at what and how we're spending, particularly our capital expenditure, to support job growth and economic recovery. And finally, the bullet point there about implement locality plans to connect our communities and transform our city. relates to the work that we've been doing around our strategic framework for Council's key priority for this term, which was housing and thriving communities. So councillors, if you recall, when we laid out the framework for that plan, one of the key pieces of it was to build locality plans or locational plans across those 4 growth areas or transformation areas or regeneration areas that we had in the city. So just remembering where they are, so that includes the east side, so expansion of the urban area on the east side out towards the airport. Within the CBD, we're talking about the inner city, so obviously a significant amount of work that's been done previously on focusing on changing the form of the CBD footprint, particularly around inner city housing. Then the regeneration potential on the western side, so Fordlands, Western Heights, but also supported by the expansion of the Pokahangi new residential zones that's currently underway. And finally, the 4th one there, councillors, was Nongataha as another future growth area. So those are the 4 that would be the focus of community engagement in the development of those locality plans. So Una, just clicking through. So councillors, again, I just wanted to highlight the Vision 2030. So again, the long-term aspiration for the city, which was supported by our community outcome statements or those goals. And then I've mentioned the key strengths that we saw as being important to leverage in enabling us to focus our projects and our efforts to help us achieve that longer term vision. So again, councillors, all of our projects have that opportunity to really help place make and place shape Rotorua, which is really important for our local community, but also makes us quite an attractive place to visit, both domestically and for international visitors. So councillors, just where we've been at the moment, obviously that focus on moving Rotorua ahead has been a key focus over the last 4 years, or 4 to 6 years. And when the Provincial Growth Fund came along with the recognition that provinces and provincial areas needed support to grow, Rotorua was still identified within that first tranche as a surge region, so an area for initial attention. So whilst we'd made some positive gains, there was a number of underlying issues that were of significant concern in our community, and obviously high unemployment and intergenerational inequity were quite significant. So very difficult problems to change without a longer term and sustained effort. So obviously the latest, the COVID-19 has impacted particularly hard on our community and those sectors of tourism, hospitality and retail, and also at least initially on wood processing and the wood industry. So that really makes it clear that we will need to again renew that effort to try and make some significant changes underlying our economy and to improve everyone's lives here in Rotorua. So next slide, please, Una. So council, on the positive though, over the last 6 years, we've been very effective at working and creating focus and getting some results through partnerships. So the Provincial Growth Fund applications are key. The work with Te Arawa around various partnerships is also critical, but also other work with different agencies such as the DHB in regard to Yakamoli. So as a community, we've been really effective in coming together and knowing our problems and understanding the potential levers we need to use to move forward, but also how to work effectively in partnerships to get those shared goals and outcomes we're seeking to achieve. And in addition, and I think this is really important for us as we go into discussions with government around stimulus packages and longer term recovery for New Zealand, is that we're able to stand up innovative projects and initiatives quickly and effectively. So I think these are really important for us to, and particularly working with the business sector, create that confidence that we will need to ensure that businesses are confident and able to invest and that we see some development of some new sectors within the economy. So again, really important if Rotorua is to build back better as part of a longer term plan. Thanks, Una. So councillors, again, you'll just start seeing here some of the discussions we've had from the presentation we gave to you at the extraordinary meeting last week. So I've just tried to summarise here. Really, we're changing from or transitioning reasonably quickly over the next few weeks and months from being a situation where we're cushioning the economic and social impacts. Again, not clear how long those might, how long that the current state might last, but we do need to start looking at whether that's just going to be for the next 2 or 3 months, and then we start being more formally into positioning our district for recovery into our next financial year. So later on today, you've got a discussion on targeted rates deferrals, and we also start a discussion around recommencing some of our existing projects over the next month or so. So from that point, councillors, we probably need to quickly start moving into discussions that are already been launched by government around what stimulus projects can be delivered quickly. So working very effectively with those on some very quick win projects. The government's certainly interested in things that are spade ready, but actually at the same time we need to start preparing ourselves for much more detailed planning and identification of initiatives out in the 1, 2, 3, 5 year horizon. So in that midpoint, councillors, you can just see there, working with business leaders and establishing some steering groups to start shaping some longer term plans and initiatives. So I think the next slide, Una, has a little more detail on those councillors. So as I mentioned before, at this stage, we're very much focused on discussions around rates deferrals and the rates rebate schemes for those who have experienced the most significant and immediate impact from COVID-19. In the presentation we gave you last week, councillors, we identified that one of the key roles that we will be providing through our CCO, Rotorua Economic Development, would be to provide that information and advice to business, but also to support efforts of agencies like MSD on redeployment and deployment initiatives for those who are currently moved quickly into being unemployed or having lost their job. So also assuring existing projects are ready to quickly recommence as well, because as you're aware, all non-essential services, and that includes many of the council's projects, have been stopped. So next slide, Una. So as we move into that positioning our district for recovery, councillors, so obviously one of the key things that we're looking at there is accelerating capital expenditure projects that will drive employment. So it's a key focus certainly from the government when they're looking at any other opportunities for stimulus projects, which is the sort of the next bullet point there. And also continue to work with business. So bringing business together with various steering groups and starting to look at longer term planning is also important to build that confidence across our business sector moving forward. Thanks, Una. So at this stage, councillors, we're just looking at trying to establish a business leaders steering group. So at this stage, we've been working very, very closely with the board of Rotorua Economic Development, who will start reaching out for potential leaders who may help us with, at this stage, what we're envisaging is 4 key work stream areas. So one for the wood industry, one for value tourism or value adding tourism, so tourism development, city development, so that's mainly focused on the inner city, as we've got a number of other partnerships focused on residential land development and those locality plans, and some other streams around some of those emerging sectors. So the intent really is that between Rotorua Lakes Council itself and the CCO, Rotorua Economic Development, we would provide that support to those steering groups to make sure that we could develop longer term plans, identify some key initiatives, and ensure that Rotorua has a strong collective business voice to government in the kind of interventions and support we need longer term. The next slide, please, Una. So councillors, just I've started to highlight then some of the immediate actions that we have within the short and slightly longer term horizon. So obviously we need to start looking at some decisions around applying some sort of rates relief for the fourth quarter of this year's rates instalment for those businesses most significantly affected. The next part of it will probably be to move very quickly into preparing a view of what may need to be done into next year's rates and rates relief options for the next financial year. We may have to traverse some of these options within the consultation document that is being prepared by Una and Thomas now for release in the end of this month and early May. Obviously, we've also talked previously, Council, and there's a desire by government to see local authorities try and accelerate some of its capital expenditure projects. This is really important for us to provide a good employment base for as many different businesses within our community as possible, but also to partner with government to identify some of those other spade-ready projects which the government may apply some stimulus packages to. There's also an important thing about assuring rapid recommencement of our existing projects. The government has certainly been keen for council to recommence quickly those projects that are already partly funded by government through the Provincial Growth Fund, and have also asked even if some of those can be accelerated from the current timeframes that are set out in the contract. Obviously, still ongoing is that important advice and information and intelligence that Rotorua Economic Development will be able to pull together about what is happening out there in our business sector. And also, very importantly for RED, is to work effectively at establishing those steering and sector groups. As I've signalled previously, and Thomas will be able to answer some more questions specifically on this, revise our financial strategy. Obviously, this means some changes to the budgets and the capital expenditure program that was being developed as part of our consultation document for this year's 2020-2021 annual plan. This would need to change now to reflect some of those impacts that you have already seen detailed in this presentation and identified in the other presentation we gave last week at the Extraordinary Council. So again, just back to some obviously questions around things like rating levels. Again, Thomas can answer off some more detailed questions on this later. But obviously at the moment, like any business, we have some immediate revenue implications. We will also need to start factoring in how changes to our capital expenditure program or even the rates relief packages may impact or need to be translated from our recovery strategy as part of that recovery and or cushioning the blow. And obviously we also need to look carefully at council services and some prudent cost reductions leading into a new financial model. And as I've said before, that really will drive what goes into the consultation document and ultimately the annual plan and rates strike for the 2021 year. So I think one more slide, councillors. So councillors, just back to this slide. So today we're looking for your endorsement of these strategies and that overall timing approach to the interventions that we're proposing. So at this stage, Thomas and I are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that, JP and Una, for coming in there. These are the technical glitches that we'll expect. So I want to just say, to begin with, an incredible amount of work in a very rapidly changing environment in even the last week, and an enormous amount of work done by the executive, both with central government with RED involved and other partners, iwi, and I congratulate you for getting to this stage today. Now, I think at this stage, what we'll do is go to questions for clarification, and then I'm going to go through every councillor once we've clarified the questions, and ask if they have something that they wish to contribute about the stimulus projects, the capital, or the concepts that you proposed with the business leaders groups. So this is starting to move into recovery. So first we'll go to questions for clarification. Now, I have to say...
Councillor McPherson has his hand up and Councillor Tapsell at this stage.
Right, Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Your Worship. 2 questions of JP. The assumptions behind any key strategies have to be checked rigorously because they both enable strategy, but they also impose limits on strategy. So my first question to you is, have you done and can we have access to an analysis of the impact of COVID-19 on Rotorua society and economy to this point? That's the first question. The second question is, has there been an analysis done of the central government's packages to identify, from our perspective, gaps in provision that would justify our intervention? Thank you.
Councillor, yeah, thank you. The challenge we've got at the moment, Councillor, is that the quantum of information is extremely difficult to see at a territorial level. So whilst there's been a report nationally of the significant shift in or the amount of money that's been paid out, for example, in the wage subsidies, the ability to see how that is being applied at a territorial level is lagging behind. So we're having to work off meetings and discussions that have been had with a number of business sectors and groups. So as an example, we've been working with MSD, who have been talking directly to all of the accommodation providers across the city. So there's approximately 119. So there's been a number of direct conversations with all of those motels as to their current situations and how that has been how they're being impacted. So that has also helped with some of the work that MSD has done around the placement of some of those who are already in emergency housing. Michelle Templer from Rotorua Economic Development and John have also been in discussions with a number of businesses specifically. The challenge we have, Councillor, is that often what is being communicated to us is being communicated in a way that is the confidentiality piece there as well. So a real reluctance to see their information brought together. So the information we have is based on a lot of those direct meetings we're having, but we're still working hard with MB to try and get more detail of that. So at this stage, there is still some gaps in information that really is affecting and impacting on our ability to say what are the gaps that we need to plug. But having said that, one of the things that we proposed, and we've been talking about it, is to actually use the government's initiatives as a gate to make sure that when we start talking about our particular targeted support, we can actually see that it's actually married up to what government has been providing as well. So that in a way will help us address some of those specific gaps. Similarly for homeowners and for businesses. I don't know if Thomas, you want to add anything to that?
Thomas?
No, Your Worship.
No, great. We go now to Tanya, Councillor Tapsell, and then Councillor Kaifong.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question this morning is just around procurement and also a contingency plan, because ensuring that our local economy recovers is probably the most important thing that we'll ever do as councillors. So the first question around the procurement process, are we able to look at that differently and start to focus on local first? Now, I know that that was a preference before, but not necessarily a requirement. So procurement is in local first for jobs, but also for resources as well, because I know that we do source some things from overseas, and that may have to be looked at, and do we have suppliers locally for that as well? The second question that I had is just around contingency. So I really support this recovery strategy, but it is a strategy that's focused around the next 4 weeks. Do we have any scenarios, or are we considering if this lasts longer than those 4 weeks? Thank you.
There's a couple of key questions in there. Councillors, you remember, so I've got on that slide there the sort of the second to last bullet point that we put into our key strategies was leveraging that central and local government investment to drive short and longer term employment. So there's two aspects of it, and you've touched on one, is that we have a number of people who can deliver services, or either as subbies or as contractors in the delivery of a lot of our projects. That's very important to us in a recovery. But equally, some of our investment in our capital expenditure may also lead to other businesses being able to leverage off that. And that's another important factor of some of the key projects that we've put in place, particularly things like the lakefront and the forest projects. So I'll stop at that point, because we'll come back to your second question, but I think Thomas can probably add on the procurement discussion a bit more.
Thank you. Yes, councillors, that is actually something that we've been considering for a number of weeks before the shutdown. I'll let you into a bit of a discussion around the museum. So there was intention to obviously go to market on the first stage of the museum until the lockdown came in, and we talked with the team there and ensuring then that the risk of COVID-19 was increasing. And so we wanted to ensure that when it went out to market, that we were in a position where we could support our local businesses in that project. And that's the sort of approach that we'll be taking across the board. And saying that, it has to be tempered with regards to the right expertise and the right individuals being able to do the work. And there are therefore circumstances where local businesses won't be able to provide the technical services and expertise that we need on certain projects. And obviously in those instances, we would obviously therefore look to balance that localism versus getting the right outcome.
Just coming back, Tanya, to your second part of your question about what happens if the shutdown goes longer. Obviously, we're looking hard at some of the predictions that are coming back from those in government and obviously around the country. Economists and everyone else has an opinion as to when this might finish and when we might be through, and obviously what that then means for the wider global economy. So we're keeping an eye on those things, and I think what we're trying to do in the strategy, councillors, is to be really clear about how we're cushioning the impact right now. If things, and be adaptive, so if things go longer, we'll be in a position to consider what that means then, not just for this fourth quarter of this financial year, but how that leads into different responses that we might have to take into next year's annual plan, or frankly, potentially into the preparation of the long-term plan. So we're trying to keep our adaptability there. The second part of it is clearly, on that basis, we're trying to be quite responsive and take the opportunities we can to talk to government about their immediate actions they're doing, so their stimulus discussions. But I think most importantly, though, we're trying to set in place the networks through these business steering groups that can actually start focusing out longer to what we need to do for the medium term and longer term for Rotorua's economic recovery. So putting those in place now means that we'll be able to take some advice from the collective of business here in Rotorua about what adaptations we need to do to this plan, but equally we keep a view on the longer term. So regardless of what scenario we've got our ability to stay responsive in the short and medium term, but we're actually starting to make sure we're putting in place the the relationships and the steering groups to have that longer term view of what actions and plans need to be in place. So it keeps it adaptive.
Thank you. And now we've got Councillor Kaifong. Councillor Kaifong, you
Thank
have
you,
your
Madam
hand
Mayor.
up.
Just a couple of questions from me, JP. You mentioned just tourism and that strategy, but are we making sure that we cover off both accommodation and retail in there? Because the tourism sector is much more than just simply the tourism spots. Because
Yeah, please feel reassured by that, Councillor. We're very much seeing the wider perspective on that. And as you're aware, the impacts are then felt quite unevenly, even amongst the tourism sector and that wider tourism, hospitality and retail sectors. So we're going to have to understand what that means as subsector elements, but equally to individual businesses. If you turn around and said to retail, the difference between a coffee shop, which may be in a high tourist area, versus a current supermarket, the impacts are quite different from a retail or a servicing perspective. So yeah, quite different impacts being felt even amongst those sectors that we can generalise about saying they've been heavily impacted.
okay, I just had a couple more questions. So in that situation, will the strategy then have a distinction between those businesses where they're kind of currently on hold, and when the lockdown is lifted, they'll kind of be in a position to start business again, as against those in positions like tourism, the airport, where there's going to be a much longer recovery period, rather than just a strategy that's kind of for the sector?
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor. And I think that's part of the need for us to make sure that as we develop these sector groups, there is that diversity of view. The same obviously applies if you start looking across at the wood processing and the wood sector. So, you know, we need to start considering what are the impacts for a variety of businesses there. There's a construction sector at the back end of that. There's the landowners, forest owners, haulage companies, those who actually work on cutting down the trees, and obviously the different levels of wood processing leading right through to some of that manufacturing as well. So some of those impacts are all being felt unevenly, and the recoveries are quicker or slower, and potentially more fragile, and could be exposed to shocks, as I suspect COVID will continue to pop up around the world and create disruptions to a whole bunch of exports going forward. So yes, Councillor, I think that's one of the key challenges for us when we set up these steering groups and these particular sector working groups, is to make sure we get that fuller understanding of what sits within and between some of those different segments within those sectors.
And my question then just leads into steering groups, the role, the function, budget implications, what outcomes you want them to achieve. Will that come back to council as to what that list of criteria would look like, and also who might be involved in those groups?
Yes, Councillor, that's important. I was just flicking through to my slide on the next steps. As you're aware, we had there that the Red would lead some of the discussion around establishing those steering groups, identifying the potential terms of reference, and seeking to gather those who are interested in participating in them. So all of that information needs to be shaped up and returned to you, so you've got confidence that as we start building towards a longer term recovery planning, using the sector, the business sector to support that, we've got the right people around the table to help us shape that.
And just one last question, what do you think are going to be the new sectors that you had on your presentation?
It's an interesting question there, Councillor. One of the things that we're putting a lot of emphasis into is obviously the housing and thriving community strategy. So we've put a lot of focus with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development and with Kāinga Ora about the potential to speed up the provision of greenfield subdivisions, but also the opportunities around building more social and transitional housing. Now that for us gives some certainty for us to see a growth in our construction sector, and if we're effective in there, hopefully that becomes a significant contributor to supporting our own wood sector and wood processing. So that construction sector is one. Another one that we've got a small but quite distinct advantages. There's a number of film and creatives that operate out of the district, and under the auspices of the Bay of Plenty film, they're already looking at some opportunities to grow that sector as an example. So those are just two, but obviously there's a number of others that have been discussed. There's a lot of work going on through Scion, and some work that had been put into the circular economy discussions. So there is a number of sector potentials there in sustainability, circular economy, film, and obviously the construction sector's potential there as well.
Thank you. And now, so that everybody feels they've got the opportunity to speak, I'm going to go around every councillor individually, so you can give your view on this Build Back Better package before we put it to the vote. And picking up on one of Councillor Kaifong's suggestions, many of you have been asking, what can we do in this phase to look at recovery? How can we, add our value to the process? And I urge you to put those ideas up as we go round individually. Now, I've got a list, just so I don't leave anybody off. It's my voting list as well. And I'll start with Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just addressing the point you've just raised, already I have emailed in to the Chief Executive the names of, I think, some key influencers who I think could contribute to a Rotorua Build Back Better recovery plan. And they're not all in Rotorua, by the way. But look, I support the approach that's being taken in JP's piece of work here. It's actually pulled together by the whole executive team. For me, the words of the Finance Minister when they first launched the economic recovery package rang a bell with me, and that was that he said now's not the time for austerity or ideology. I think Council's already agreed to the three-step approach of fighting the virus and cushioning the blow and supporting the recovery. And that aligns to the approach of government, and I think that's important that we stay aligned with central government. Some business owners have already had to fold, and there are more to come. And skill and talent retention is vital if we're to recover. It's clear now that now's not the time for a blanket rate freeze approach, in my view. That would show a lack of confidence in Rotorua going forward and in our economy. Be a clear signal for the people here involved in business and the unemployed to quit Rotorua and just create further possible irreparable damage to our economy. So look, I support this plan entirely. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, at this time, I think that we should be pulling our expenditure back. I don't think that there's too many projects you've got going on at the moment that is not directly aimed at or related to anything but tourism. And I think that for the next 12 months, at least 6 months, but 12 months or longer, we're going to see an awful lot of people involved in tourism that are going to be on the dole or seeking work in other areas. So I think austerity is where we actually have to start seriously considering I can't see us pouring money into the projects that we've got going on, and increasing our debt is going to be good for anybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kaifong.
Can you come back to me?
Sure.
Thanks.
Can't hear.
No, I've got a list. So
Councillor McPherson is next.
Yes, Councillor McPherson.
Councillor McPherson, can you unmute yourself, please?
There you go. I've unmuted myself. I'm not convinced on what we've been presented with this morning. It's been essentially a verbal and at times a rhetorical overview of the situation we face. And I think there's been a great deal of work already completed, particularly centrally, on the probable impact of COVID-19. And there is like a plan B and a plan C available at that level. And I don't see the equivalent at our level. There seems to be undue surety in the position taken by our planners. And I would look forward to syntheses of these consultations that's being undertaken with various interest groups, leaders of those interest groups. I think they're appropriate, but I'd really want to see a systematic analysis of the social and economic impact of COVID-19 on Rotorua. And without that, I'm not at all comfortable with the assumptions that appear to lie behind these key strategies. The analysis of the central government's packages to identify gaps, so I would imagine Red is well advanced in doing that. And my hope was this morning we would hear the outcome of that analysis. So that's the first area of concern. The second is that our mayor has spoken publicly and about the importance of targeting and having rightful targeting, but it's not at all clear what criteria and processes will be used to make those judgments. The approach in this area appears to be trust me and vote for this proposal. Well, I'm sorry, it's the record in the past has been, in my view, pretty unconvincing. And then I turn to the way in which we're actually making decisions. And I note that the Parliamentary Epidemic Response Committee has taken a bipartisan view that council should now be freezing and cutting rates to ease the burden on ratepayers. I don't see any equivalent.
Point of order, Councillor McPherson. I will add that Local Government New Zealand are clarifying that statement that has been promulgated, and it would appear from my discussion with the President of LGNZ yesterday that there is going to be a statement coming out that is not what the common understanding was at all, just so that you know that.
Well, I'll await that statement, and I understand that LGNZ has its own position, but that there's huge diversity amongst the councils around New Zealand, and there would be from many quarters support for the ideas that councils really should be freezing and cutting rates to, quote, ease the burden. I don't think there's any doubt that some very senior ministers and their opposition equivalents did intend that the burden on ratepayers be eased. So I'm puzzled as to why our strategy here, our plan A, takes a very different view and is only talking about putting off rates payments, no relief in sight, really, no freeze in sight. And what's puzzling to me is the opportunity seems to have been missed to take a bipartisan approach to the way in which we work as a council. The announcements that have already been made by the Mayor and Deputy Mayor opposing a rates freeze precludes so many possibilities that I'm puzzled and dismayed by the position being taken rather than following the example of the Parliament where they took a bipartisan approach and have already significantly improved the government's response to COVID-19. So on balance, I'm pretty unconvinced about the approach being taken. One, because we don't have the material, the base material, so we can check assumptions. And secondly, we haven't identified gaps in provision. And thirdly, we're taking a position which is quite contrary to what I understand the bipartisan view is being taken in Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor McPherson. We do have the paper in confidentiality today about rates, so we shouldn't be having a public discussion until we've seen that paper in confidence after this section of the meeting. Thank you. Move now to Councillor Maxwell. Councillor Maxwell, have you got something that you wish to add on Build Back Better?
Yes, can you hear me, Una? Kia ora koutou, everybody. First of all, thank you, JP and our executive team for the effort and the approach that you've brought forward to us for this for our meeting. I support and tautoko the plan there, and I want to just add that I think you've covered the things that we agreed to well over a week ago. So I'm pleased about that, and so tautoko the effort that's gone in. Just a couple of questions for me. One is I support what you mentioned about tourism and wood processing, the hospitality and the retail area is hurting very much in our hometown here in these very challenging times. I also heard you mentioned about some of our region, some of our suburbs, places like Western Heights, Selwyn Heights, Orwhata, Nongata, and that. What I do want to ask you is, with the plan that you brought forward, just briefly, JP, are you able to say what are some of the thoughts that the team had on bringing those areas back, making it better? Thank you, JP.
Probably, oh well, JP, you could cover that off. That is in our housing plan. That's what JP referred to as the locality plan. Do you have anything to add, JP?
Not really at this time, Your Worship, but again, we were taking a wider view of how we can look at what communities might want to assist regeneration and support those areas. So obviously we've done a lot on the sort of the playground developments and key park developments, but obviously it's got to go wider into looking at how suburban shopping centres operate, what is the centres of those communities and how do we build them to be effective. So much wider discussion. It's probably not worth doing here, but I can certainly come back to talking to Councillor Maxwell and the others as the housing strategy and definitions of what we mean by those locality plans are shaped up.
Yeah, and so just finally, Madam Mayor, I'm pleased that you acknowledge the fact that high unemployment, especially for Māori, and that's how it's been, and that's going to be even tougher in these times. With the teams that you're hoping to set up and that to help involve in helping us through this, please consider Pukeroa, Orua Whata and the others that are doing a lot of good mahi in our city and rural area. Please consider them. Kia ora.
Thank you. And now Councillor Rotorua Tate.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. I hope you can hear me. I'm a bit distant from my panel, so I hope you can hear me. And I have had my hand up, but because we're doing it the other way, so thank you for that. First of all, I want to say that I support, absolutely support what we're being presented with today. Build Back Better. I would also add, Your Worship, go hard. As a council, we need to go hard and go early. And that's what I see here. I see this strategy, I see this this way forward that's been presented today in this report. I actually don't see it as just 4 weeks. I see it as the next 18 months, a work plan for us for the next 18 months. It's been given a lot of thought in a very short time, so I do applaud that. In the bullet points that you put up, that JP put up, and particularly the one around position Rotorua as leading the resurgence of tourism and wood processing, I actually do see forestry as somewhat different to wood processing, and I'd love to see that included somewhere. And also the other thing too, as a business group, I believe our farming community are absolutely essential to that as well, because it will be impacting on their businesses. And I haven't heard them mentioned or referred to this morning. I'd like to think that we could ensure that our farming community are brought into this as well, because often they bring a perspective that is actually quite relevant to the business community in the city as well. So that's something that I would like to add there. It is right where the, and actually, can I just say, the assumptions that have been made here, particularly about the impacts, they're actually pretty much spot on. If you look at Christchurch, if you look at Whakaari, if you look at some of the significant, what would you call it, events that have happened overseas in recent years, there are some key factors that could come out of that, and we're pretty much spot on. Of course, we'll have to tailor those to the Rotorua situation, but I suspect that we're looking pretty good in the assumptions that we've made, and things will become more clearer as we go through over the next few weeks. But we did have, prior to this event, or prior to the COVID-19, we did already as a communities, Your Worship, have some underlying challenges, and particularly in the social services area. And I think this might be an opportunity now, as I guess out of every sorry situation, there is something good, if I can put it that way. And I think the opportunity for us to look at transformational social services in the future in our district, that's where we can apply some really innovative and new thinking. I'd like to think that when we set up perhaps the social services or a people leadership group in that area, that we will bring in some new people who possibly have been waiting for some time to be able to share some of their innovative thinking about the way we deliver social services, what they might look like, and indeed who might be providing those services in the future. So no, and those must be transformational. So I'm heartened with what I've seen this morning. I can't believe that we've got a paper that's presented so much to us in such a short time. And I do want to agree with you, support you in Your Worship in congratulating the staff on this. But certainly I will be voting for this paper this morning. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. And I think you're so right about those other sectors. And I'm also very heartened because we don't have Te Tato or the community boards at council. But at a meeting yesterday with the chairs, we heard about the action and activation that's happening at the lakes, the rural sector and the iwi sector. And it was very, very heartening. And they're certainly looking at doing things differently. So we move now to Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've just noted down a few notes as we've been talking, and I want to touch on the question about needing some further research. Look, to be honest, I really think that this isn't the time for research. This is the time for leadership and action. We have government agencies that are doing economic modelling that we can ask and request, can we see that too? But our staff are at such limited capacity, and actually they've been doing an amazing job to get this paper to where it is. For us today. So thank you to all of the staff that have done that, but I don't want to be using any additional resources on research and trying to explain what just happened when we need to be focusing on the future and what we need to do in the short time frame that we have. Now the job area is where I am really concerned, particularly around tourism. We know it is our biggest employer. It actually brought in and contributed 493 million to our economy in the previous financial year. So the recovery for this will be long-term, and bearing in mind that they are our biggest employer and the contribution that will no longer be there in the short term, we do need to be targeting them in our relief packages as well for those small tourism businesses that really are the driver behind our local economy. So I totally support targeting and supporting tourism. Investment and stimulating our economy is going to be crucial. So bringing forward capital expenditure projects, I completely agree with, and fast tracking any procurement approaches, because we need to be having infrastructure and visitor destination, high visitor destination here in Rotorua to actually bring the tourism back. You know, we're at the end. This is how a tourism industry, well-known tourism industry person explained it to me. New Zealand is at the end of the taxi rank when it comes to tourism. So if we're going to ensure that we recover from this when the world opens its doors again, we need to be investing in Rotorua as a destination. That's going to be absolutely crucial to our jobs. And someone mentioned this morning about the dole. I just want to remind people that at this current time, more than half of the population of New Zealand are relying on government assistance for income and housing needs. So, you know, the conversation about dole and people and beneficiaries, it's actually half of New Zealand right now. So the faster that we can get jobs back on track, the faster that we can get projects going in our community that employ our locals, the better it will be. And just lastly, you know, I support any action that will be beneficial for the health of our locals, but I also support any action that will protect not only our livelihoods, but also our economy as well. So those are sort of just the big things for me, but I do want to see if we can get any further information from the government on what their modelling will be for our economy and our jobs, so that we can get some guidance on basically what will those new economies and businesses look like, and how can we support our food and our fibre industries, which are agriculture and forestry, because they're 70% of our exports to the world, and we play a big part in providing high quality services and resources to the world from Rotorua. So that's just my quick thoughts on it, and thank you for allowing us all that time there.
Thank you. And now we move to Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to say a big thank you to all of our council staff. You know, so much has happened in such a short time span, and so for you guys to all come together and you know, organise our council meetings and these presentations, thank you so much for that. I really do think that this is not a time to play politics. It's a time for us all to come together, work together, and help our community rebound from an event like this. And even though we're impacted by an event like this, it's crucially important that we still invest in our critical infrastructure and our community. This will have positive flow-on effects for our community for generations and generations to come. And I think it will give our community and investors put them both at ease, and let them know that we're still investing in Rotorua's future. It's really good to see that we'll be addressing rates as well. And as Tanya mentioned, tourism and hospitality is our largest employer in Rotorua. So an event like this will affect these industries for months and possibly, you know, years to come. So it's crucially important that our community, as well as our lakes and rural communities who are already isolated, and thank you Merepeka for mentioning farming as well. They'll be, you know, they're still in the fields, they're still out hard working, they're an essential service and keeping our country running during a time like this. And it's crucially important for them to know that we do have their backs, and especially at a time like this. Kia ora, thank you.
Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Wang. And now we move to Councillor Yates.
Kia ora, thank you, Madam Chair. I too would like to support the strategy that's been put before us, Build Back Better. A couple of things I've also noted here is one key thing that's come through with those that have supported the notion is if we demonstrate confidence, our business and our other communities will also benefit from that. They'll see it role modelled actually, and they will then recover, I believe, far greater and quickly too. Tourism, we've talked about tourism. One of the things that came out of our meeting with chairs yesterday was the housing package. So I mentioned around hotels and motels having housed our homeless, possibly a little bit more information around what the recovery will look like for our hotels and motels once the housing scheme comes into play. I'm hoping that tourism will be part of that package that helps boost that economy again. The resurgence, once again, through our te tatau yesterday, we spoke about such things as the resurgence in wood and productivity. Could I also suggest that looks at native planting of natives? That will also ensure that our health industry is once again brought into a financial opportunity, I suppose, and that could also lead on to farming. So not just with cattle farming, but utilising land there for greater resurgence of our native planting. Retail was another area that I picked up on. Local shopping locally, there's a lot of resurgence again in our own local community. Yes, COVID-19 has made an impact on shops being open, but the potential is, with us looking forward, is that we can potentially also have locals actually shopping locally as opposed to going out to other districts, which has often crippled our own economy here. So those are my final pieces, but I do like the kupu that Merepeka used, which was transformational. This is a transformational time, and I'd really like us all to be on the same page, looking at how we can transform our economy, how we can transform our community moving forward. Also, finally, a huge mihi to our staff who've been working tirelessly behind the scenes. Kia ora.
Kia ora. And now we go to Councillor Kai Fong that we skipped.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry, for me, I'm still kind of trying to digest all of the information, and I know the staff have done a huge amount of work to try and put this all together, but for me it's around just having the opportunity to try and think about some of the stuff, and it would have been really nice to have the opportunity for myself to be able to talk to some of the people involved around this before this gets presented. And so I'm kind of sitting on the fence. I like the concept of some of the strategies in the Build Back Better, but I'm also really concerned about the fact that this is potentially going to be a global recession, and that just concentrating on two small sectors of tourism and wood processing aren't necessarily going to be beneficial for the whole of the Rotorua community. We have to remember that it's impacted the whole of the community, not just these particular sectors. And so, you know, really, where are we making sure that we are creating jobs for everyone, that we're keeping people in employment, that we're keeping money that's being spent on contractors and work in Rotorua. And I know we haven't had the rates discussion yet, and that's why I'm just not sure if we're agreeing to this whole paper or we're just agreeing to parts of the strategy, because I have some concerns around just simply recommencing existing projects. And I know that we need to make sure that we're investing in our community and that we're still undertaking capital works, and that we're ensuring that the infrastructure projects that are critical in terms of the three waters are undertaken. But there may be other projects that we have committed to where in this financial environment we really need to be taking a really good look about prioritising those wants and needs. What are the things that the community really, really needs to get back on its feet, and what are those nice to haves? And I know we haven't had enough information, and that's part of my concern about trying to make a decision around this is, you know, how does this all fit into the overall budget? What's the expenditure? What is our borrowing levels going to look like? What's the overall effect going to be on rates? And so I'm just kind of sitting on the fence. Sorry.
Thank you. Well, and I'll just close in that it's been great to hear you all and the breadth of input that you've given. What we're really agreeing to at this stage is about the strategy, and it's moved very much into the futures phase about not just fighting the virus, but being prepared to return to whatever our community looks like when we get through this next phase. And so it is a strategy document, and it is underpinned by a lot of work in 1 week. and we'll go into the rates discussion later and the rates deferral. But I agree with the comments that have come through about we've got to get moving fast and get going. This is a time for transformation, because Rotorua, that is quite devastated by this impact, is not going to be the same. And we are guided by central government, and as Councillor Tapsell said, the research coming through there from Treasury and from senior ministers, and also the fact that they've taken a bipartisan approach. I think for us, the word that I liked was confidence. And if we're seen to being bipartisan, and if we're seen to falling apart and fighting on small issues and not agreeing that we need a strategy that takes us forward, that engages with our community and those sectors most affected, that is led by RED and the Chamber of Commerce and those other sectors, then we're going to miss the boat. Can I just assure all councillors that every day I've rung mayors around the country, and yesterday had a discussion with the president of LGNZ. Our approach here, Build Back Better, is innovational and is seen as exciting. This is not the time to say we retrench or the economy will go backwards. And that is the frightening thing from that sort of paradigm that I'm hearing. I do agree with all of you that say there may be things that we could slow down or phase differently. And I think you'll hear that discussion later in confidential. But this is, I think it's a very good package, very solid. And I know that it's taken all of council executive an enormous amount of work to get this ready for us for today. So in principle, we're really approving a strategy today, and the nuts and bolts of it and the flesh on the bones comes clearer when we go into the specifics about our COVID-19 response for rates. So I'm fully supportive of this strategy, and I'd like to call for a mover and a seconder. So we've now got to go to the screen, and I see.
So I got Dave Donaldson and Tanya Tapsell.
So if you could go to your screen now and raise your hand for the recommendation that the report COVID-19 Rotorua Economic Development Plan Build Back Better be received, and that Council supports the principles and objectives as set out in the presentation, Rotorua Economic Recovery Plan Build Back Better. So if you raise your hand on the screen, and Una will let us know.
It's carried.
It's carried. Thank you. And thank you for that, councillors. And there were some very wise words. Yes.
A point of order. Can we have a division, please? I think it's important that a couple of us who are not comfortable with this plan have their position recorded.
Certainly. Una, can you, I haven't got the full screen of the hands. All those in favour, if you give us the vote. And do you wish yours to be recorded, Councillor McPherson?
Yes, please.
Certainly. Una, if you can just give us the number.
Yeah. Madam Mayor, yeah, I'm pleased if we call for a division, let it show those who have supported this recommendation too, and
yes,
those who didn't support it.
Yes.
And I'm happy with that division being displayed.
I hope you can see me, Una.
We can see you.
I've got that your hand's up there, Mary Picker, and you're waving away. Thank you.
We've got it, Mary Picker.
Oh, thank you.
I've got those, thank you. So everybody, so I have 4 as the Mayor, Councillor Donaldson, Councillor Bentley, Councillor Maxwell, Councillor Rokawa Tate, Councillor Tapsell, Councillor Wang and Councillor Yates. Those that wish to be recorded against, Councillor McPherson and Councillor Kaifong.
Right, thank you, and the motion is carried.
I'm abstaining from voting.
You prefer it to be written as abstained?
Noted.
Thank you, noted. Right, thank you, and I did appreciate all of you putting your input in, and I think that's the best way for us. We'll always take points of clarification and then give the opportunity for the sweep of input. So I need a resolution now to go into public excluded.
Chair, could I just interject for a minute before we go into the resolution for public excluded, just to update members on our live streaming. Unfortunately, we were unable to get the live streaming of this event going this morning. We did have 2 tests of the live streaming during the week and they worked absolutely fine. So we were unable to find out what the issue has been with our live streaming today. However, the actual meeting is still being recorded, and as soon as the meeting is finished, the support crew in the background will get the recording of the public up onto the council website. So apologies for that. That's been one of our technical issues that we're working through today. So thank you for your indulgence on that.
So we've still got the recording of the session. Thank you. So do I have a mover and a seconder to go into public excluded, and the items that are going to be considered the contract for the extension of the local road and network management contract, the contract for the recommendation to award road and network maintenance and management contract, and the Rotorua Lakes Council rates deferral proposal, COVID-19. Do I have a mover?
Have Councillor Maxwell mover and Councillor Yates.
Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Contrary, carried. And we, for the purposes, will give you, would you like a couple of minutes break so that you can get a cup of coffee and come back to the table? Thank you, everybody. I think, and for the public, your indulgence, please. We will get the technical glitches, but there will be a full public recording of this. Thank you.